All right, ladies and gentlemen, very, very big welcome to Lecture 4. Thank you very much for coming today. Today I'm going to talk about an important chapter, which is going to be building on the calculations we started last week. We are going to be talking about Chapter 8, Scheduling, Resources and Costs. And we're going to keep on building one calculation after another calculation after the other. Hence, it is very important that you guys continue to be attending your classes regularly to ensure that you are able to go and covering those, calculation, understand them, be able to go and apply them later in a tutorial. You need to come to your lectures because it is during those lectures that I'm going to be explaining those calculations for you. And it's only going to be about applying all of this information later. So you need to come to the lectures, because if you don't come to the lectures, we won't be able to go and understand what you need to apply in the tutorial. So today I'm going to be talking about Chapter 8, which is Schedule, Resources and Cost. Which is really building on what we've covered last week about talking about project networks. So last week we did speak about the building of the networks of project management. It's all about the planning to be able to create and get a schedule. So now it's about building from that. After you have the network, after you have the work breakdown structure, how do we go and assign resources? How do we go and understand the costing that is associated with any of that task we are basically talking about? So we're going to today understand the difference between time constraint and resource constraint schedules. We're going to identify different types of resource constraints. We're going to describe how smoothing is used on time constraint projects. We're going to describe how leveling is used for resource constraint projects. We're going to understand how project management software creates resource constraint schedules. We're going to understand when and why splitting tasks should be avoided. We're going to identify general guidelines for assigning people to specific tasks. We're going to identify common problems with multi-project resource scheduling. We're going to explain why a time-phased budget baseline is needed. And we are going to be creating a time-phased project budget baseline. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we go and we think about the scheduling. We need to think about a project network that we created last week and that you guys applied as part of your tutorial. A project network is never going to be a schedule unless you assign people to it, because the network needs to have a person to do the job for that activity. Without assigning that person, without understanding how much that person basically gets paid per day, you won't be able to go and really go and get a proper scheduling to go and happen. So the assumption that resources will be available in the required amount when needed is actually not true. Sometimes you do not have the resources that you need, and that's a problem that basically would prevent you from finishing a project on time. So you need to go and actually think about when you want to go and add new projects, when you want to go and say, all right, we're going to go and provide more work to do. You need to be realistic. Do we have enough resources that are actually available to be able to go and do the job? And a lot of time you might find out that no, you do not have the resources to be able to go and get the new project delivered when you want it to be delivered. You need to bear in mind that a cost estimate are not a budget. The only way it becomes a budget is where you go and think about that cost and say, how am I going to go and split that cost into how much money I'm going to be needing at a particular point of time? Like how much am I going to be needing for months 1, week 1, week 2, week 3, and so on. So costs are not a budget until they have been time phased. You need to know, when am I going to be needing this money? We need to go and think about both of these, overlay the previous time-oriented network with resourcing and cost. The network diagram is time-oriented. When can we go and finish things? The actual resources and costs are more, different. They're more schedule-oriented, they're more resource-oriented, they're more cost-oriented. We basically need all of these components for us to be able to go and get the right understanding about when a schedule could be completed and what cost it's going to go and complete it at. So we started talking about the work breakdown structure. I applied that example of the work breakdown structure with you in tutorial 2. Then in tutorial 3, we started talking about creating a network diagram, which is basically built on the work breakdown structure. Today we are going to be talking about the resourcing and cost scheduling, which is built on the network and on the scope and work breakdown structure we spoke about earlier. All of this together, in addition to considering all of these risks, will give us a master plan that we need to go and think about to be able to go and manage our work accordingly. So Everything is linked, as you can see from this graph. Now, when stuff and equipment are added to the schedule, you need to ask yourself this question: will the assigned resources be enough for me to be able to go and get the job done? Because sometimes you might go and add resources, but you go and find out that the resources you've added are not actually enough for me to be able to go and get the job done. Do we need to outsource some work because we do not have enough resources? Or what do we do? Are there resources dependencies? And does this impact on the critical path? So for example, you might have two tasks, one task and, second task, they both require the same resource, and you won't be able to start the second task until you finish the first task, because that person who's currently doing the first task needs to go and jump and do the second task straight after that. So you need to go and ask yourself, are there resource dependencies? Do we have enough resources? This is very, very important because that impact on the critical path. Do we have any flexibility in using resources? Like, can I go and delay using some resource? Can I use the resource whenever I want to? Are they always going to be available or not? Is the original deadline that has been set to me to go and deliver realistic, comparing and considering what sort of deadline we actually go and have available at that point of time? So a lot of time what we do what is known as resource smoothing. We attempt to basically even out the demand for resources by using Slack. So when I talk about a Slack, sometimes, we spoke about that last week. Sometimes there are some activities that I can delay. So what do? By delaying that first activity, I am actually able to go and use less resources within my overall project. I don't need to use more resources than what I need to. So sometimes we try to use the Slack to delay some activities so that we will minimize the amount of resources we are going to be needing on our project at any point of time. So that's something to go and bear in mind. Resource constrained scheduling is where we cannot add any extra resources. Like, resources are fixed. The duration of your project could increase to be able to go and bear in mind that your resources are fixed, but you cannot, you cannot add any extra resources because we are talking about a resource constrained project. Now, when you talk about a project, you talk about many constraints. There are sometimes what we call a technical constraint. Constraints related to the network sequence in which a project activity occurs. For example, you cannot test any code before you actually write the code. This is just simply a technical constraint. You need to write the code before you can test the code. That's technically, there's no other way for you to go and do that job. Sometimes there's what we call a physical constraint, activities that cannot occur in parallel or are affected by contractual or environmental conditions. For example, you might want to go and speak to the florist, and you might want to go and speak to the actual celebrant of the wedding. But you cannot be at the same place at the same time because there's a physical constraint. There's only one person. You cannot be at two locations to be able to go and do this job. So these activities cannot actually potentially start in parallel unless you have more people and more resources available. Resource constraint, the absence, shortage, or unique interrelationship and interaction characteristics of resources that require particular sequencing of activities. So for example, I might have task 1 and task 2. They both need the same material, or they both need the same people, or they need a person who is currently working on another project. So what is that? This is basically a resource constraint. You do not have resource that you need to be able to go and work on all of those activities together. So you don't have enough resources to finish the job when you want the job to be completed. So when we go about classifying our projects, we classify them as time-constrained projects and resource-constrained projects. Now, you're going to ask me, what is a time-constrained project? What is a time resource-constrained project? Well, sometimes it might be clear, but I'm going to go and explain these in more details. So a time resource project, guys, time-constrained project must be completed by a particular date. Whatever you do, you need to finish by that particular date. Requires using of the leveling techniques that focus on balancing or smoothing the demand for my resources, uses a slack to try to manage resource utilization. So we use a positive slack to delay the activities that won't delay my duration of my project. But the primary constraint, the concern here, is the project needs to go and be completed by a specific particular time. So it's very, very important to go and bear in mind when that project needs to go and be completed. Look at this example. We have a project that is finishing in day 24. At the moment, there's 2 employees used in days 0 to 4, 4 employees used between days 4 to 10, 1 employee used between 10 and 16, and 3 employees between 16 and 24. So this is what we're using at the moment. I want you guys to look at irrigation, and I want you to look at the fencing and walls. Can any of these activities be delayed? Can any of these be delayed? Hold on, Lisa. So you said yes, they can be delayed. Which ones can be delayed? You can speak to me live, by the way. You don't have to chat. You can tell me if you want. Which one between irrigation and fencing and walls could be delayed?
Both of them.
They both could be delayed. That's correct, because we have extra spacing here available. Okay, now we are using 2 people, 4 people, 1 person, 3 people. Which one would we delay, this or this, to make the use of resources more balanced? Would I delay irrigation, or would I delay fencing and walls to make the resources more level, more balanced?
Fencing and walls.
Which one?
Fencing and walls.
Fence and walls. Why would you lay fence and walls?
Because there's 2 people working on that.
Okay, so then what will happen if I delay it is I have 3 people here, 3 people here, 2 people here, 2 people here. If you were to go and delay this one, you would have had 2 people, 3 people, 2 people, 3 people. Because you delayed this one here to make it start here, you now have 3 people here, 2 and 1, 3. 1, 2 here, 2 here, and 3 here. So you make 2, 2, 3, and 3. And that's what we talk about in terms of leveling. You need to try to think, what can I do to basically minimize the need for my resources? If we were to go with the original plan, we would need 4 resources. If we were to go with the new plan, we only would need 3 resources, and we will still be able to go and get the same job to go and be completed. That's something to go and bear in mind. By the way, does that make sense, guys? Tell me, my friend.
So in the third graph, yeah, there's like 2 people, 2 people, 3 people, 3 people, right?
Yes.
What happens if you delay one? If you like delay in picture, if you delay one.
Which activity you want me to delay?
Second, 2.
This one?
Fencing. If you delay fencing in there.
If I delay fencing, that's what we've done.
What happens if you delay irrigation in there?
Because if you delay irrigation, you can delay it. Look, there's a space, you can delay it. Yeah. But if you delay this, you will be using 1 person, 2 person.
Yeah.
And you will be using here 2 person, 3 person. So you'll be using 2, 3, 2, 3.
Yeah.
But if you delay this one, you'll be using 2, 2, 3, 3. So you see how it's more balanced than 2, 3, 2, 3. You're using 2 for an extended duration. Then you increase your usage by 1 person for that other duration. Otherwise, what you do, use 2 between this period and this period. Then you have to use 3. Then you have to use 2 again. Then you have to use 3 again. It's not balanced.
Okay.
Make sense, Ujwal?
Yeah.
Any other questions, guys?
That's all. Thanks.
No worries. Anybody else have any questions? All right. Now, resource demand leveling technique for time constrained project. Like this is the leveling. This is how we level the use of our resources. Advantages of doing this is the peak resource demand are reduced. Like instead of using 4, I'm using 3 now. Okay, because I actually balance the use of my resources. Resources over the life of the project are reduced. Fluctuations in demand, up, down, are minimized. That's why we're using 2, 2, 3, 3 instead 2, 3, 2, 3, because you want to minimize any fluctuations whatsoever in that particular sort of operation. Disadvantage: when you are going and using those resources like that, you are actually minimizing the slack. Like I took away that slack, it's gone. Because I took away that slack, there's more constraint, things could go wrong more. So loss of flexibility that occurs from reducing my slack. Because I've already reduced it, I can't reduce that activity again. Increases in the criticality of the activities that I go and have. So there's more critical path activities. What is a critical path activity? It's an activity that cannot be delayed at all, because if you delay it, it will actually go and delay the project. So you need to be basically very careful on that information. Resource constrained projects. We cannot add more resources. Resources are limited in quantity or in availability. They need to sequence the activities taking into account burst time and resources. If the resources are constrained, then the project will take more time because we can't add more resources. So when you are working with a resource constrained project, you need to think about, how am I going to decide, how am I going to be assigning resources? So we need to go and think, resources are limited in quantity or availability, therefore need to sequence the activities taking into account burst time and resources. So how do we decide when we do not have enough resources, what sort of rule we go and try to follow to be able to go and decide what resources, what tasks we are going to be doing? You do it by trying to use some rules as much as you can. Activities can be scheduled using a rule that focuses on the following. They say, if you have constrained resources, what you would do is you would go and initially try to schedule the activity that had the minimum amount of slack. So that's the first activity you would do. After you have done the activity that has a minimum amount of slack, and there are no more activities that have a minimum amount of slack, then you try to use the activity that has a minimum duration. And after you use the activity that has minimum duration, and there are no more activities with a minimum duration, you try to go and make the activity that have the lowest activity identification number. So you know how every activity will have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they'll be numbered, or they will have like A, B, C, D, E. You go and use the lowest activity identification number as a third rule for you to go and decide which activity you are going to go and start working on when your resources are constrained. The parallel method is really used to apply heuristics. What is the parallel method? An iterative process starting at the first time period of the project, and you schedule one period at a time from the start all the way to the end by using the 3 priority rules I mentioned here. So can you just take a minute to write those priority rules in front of you? Minimum slack, smallest duration, and lowest activity identification. So write those rules in front of you now so that we are able to go and really do that exercise. So I'll give you a minute to go and write it down. Alrighty. Now, let's look at this example. Guys, what is this called? What is this called? We did it last week. What is it called? Come on, guys. You know it. A net. Dang, what is this called?
Sorry, sir. I really forgot the name.
It's a network diagram. Okay? So it's called the network diagram.
Okay.
So yes, last week, what have you guys done with the network diagram? What have we done last week with the network diagram?
We calculate latest start
Yeah.
and
Later start, early finish, latest finish.
late finish, yeah.
So I gave you last week, I gave you all of these various empty graphs, and I said it is now your turn to go and fill all of those graphs.
Yeah.
And what you guys went and did, you guys went and added all of these graphs at that time. So that's what you've done. A job very well done. So we now build from that particular perspective. Now, I told you there are rules we need to follow. So let's look at the rules. Can you tell me which activity would I do first? Which activity would I do first?
One.
One. How many resources I need? How many programmers?
Two.
Two. So we only have three programmers overall. That's three programmers, three programmers, three programmers. So we know how many programmers we have. So we need two. So I would write here between day 0 and day 2, I would write 2p, 2p. Why? Because for the first day, I need 2 people. And for the second day, I need 2 people. So I'll write 2p. Which activity would I do next?
2, 3, 4.
2, 3, 4.
2, 3, 4. Which one? 2, 3, or 4? Yeah, remember you have to look, you have to apply the rules. Okay,
Yeah.
why would I do 3?
There is no slack time, 0.
There's no slack time, it's 0 slack time. So I will do that one next. That is correct. So that's 2. So this is activity 3. So what would I put? Tell me, what would I put? What would I put for activity 3?
2p.
2p, between which activity and which activity? Between which day and which day?
2 and 3.
2 and 3? Why? How long is activity 3 gonna take?
From 2 to 6.
From 2 to 6. So I have to put 2 to 6, 2p, 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 2p. Okay, using the rules, what would I do next? Which one were you? Activity 2 or activity 4?
2.
Which one?
2.
Okay, so why did you say activity 2?
Because it has less slack than 4.
It have less slack. Okay, that's fine. So it have less slack. So we go and you're trying to use this rule, you know, minimum slack, smallest duration when we don't have slack, and lowest identification number. So minimum slack, smallest duration. So let's look here. You told me we're going to go and use activity number 2 because it have minimum slack. Okay. I disagree with you. Do you know why I disagree with you? How many resources does activity 2 require?
2.
If I was to start, if I was to go and actually start that activity and start it in day 2, do I have enough resources?
No.
No.
So can I start activity 2 really?
No.
No.
So which one can I start?
4.
6.
Okay, remember we have to do all the activities in parallel first.
Yeah.
So which one do I start?
4.
I do the
You
4.
just need one programmer. Yeah.
I do the 4. And when do I start 4? This is 4. Where do I put? What do I put in this box?
2.
What do I put?
2 to 4.
2 to 4. What would I put in each box?
1p.
1p, because I have one person.
Yeah.
I put nothing here because I can't start that activity there because I do not have enough people.
Yeah.
And I put 1p here because that's what I have at the moment. I have only one person and I can use that one person. between day 2 and day 3. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we did 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Sorry,
Now,
so Fatty, are we doing this later by tutorial? Because I'm a bit still confused about the allocations concerning the people.
there will be many exercises. This is one of the activities that students find the most challenging. It requires a lot of common sense and a lot of thinking. But yes, there will be many activities in the tutorial today to try to apply them. The heuristics, sometimes, it might look like you're doing the heuristic, but there's something else you need to think about. But we will try to apply more of them today in the tutorial. That's correct.
All right, thank you, sir. Because I'm getting so confused at the moment.
No worries, Jake. Okay, let's go back for a second, Jake. Jake, you understand that we need to do things in parallel?
Yes.
Okay. You understand that we start with things that have 0 slack?
Mm-hmm.
And you understand that this activity requires 2 people.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it needs to start between day 2, and because it's 4 days, it needs to finish in day 6. Do you understand that?
Yeah, based from our last activity, yes.
Correct. So because of that, we need to start activity 3, and we need to write 2P, 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 2P.
Yeah, got it.
Then the next one we need to go and think about, we either could do this or we could do this, because this is the parallel one, yeah?
Yes.
So I can't do this. Why? Because we have maximum of 3 people. We already used 2 people here. If I was to do this activity and use 2 people, 2 people, 2 people, 2 people, that would be using 4 people. I do not have enough people. I only have 3 people.
Right.
And because of that, we use this one because this requires 1 person.
Yeah.
And we require using that 1 person for 2 days. It could start in day 2. And that's why we said we can't start this activity here, but we could start this activity here because from day 2 to day 4, 1 person and 1 person.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Why is 4 and 5 on row 2 blocked out?
This one here?
On the Gantt chart, on the number 2, and then days 4 and 5.
Why is this blocked out?
Just the last 2 parts.
I don't understand which one.
Or on the second row, right? There are 4 X's.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, correct.
For the last 2, why are they X's instead of blank? I mean, you can just allocate 1 person there after they're done with task 4.
Okay, because what you are assuming is you cannot finish that activity without having 2 people. Okay, so you're assuming you need both people at the same time for the job to be completed. Okay, and if I allocate 1 person, it won't finish the job. So you need 2 people to be available at the same time. Does that make sense?
I mean, yes, kind of, but like why weren't, let's say for example, if because task 2 requires 6 days, correct?
Correct.
So it will
That's
take
6, but that's 6 days if you have 2 people.
Yeah. So
what you're saying, and I know what you're saying, why don't I use 1 person here and that will reduce my duration by 1 day? That's what you're saying. Okay, I get what you're saying. And maybe in practice you will do that. But, I'm trying to teach it for you here. We're kind of making it based on an assumption that you need both resources available at the same time to be able to go and complete the task. But I know what you're saying. I'm saying, well, in practice, can I go and maybe split the task? The problem with splitting the task a lot of time is it actually increases your time instead of decreasing your time. So because you're splitting it into 1 piece versus another piece, you actually, you could be better off using the resources fully on something you can complete than using that resources on something that you know is going to be split and it won't be completed. And that's why we try to assign the resources when they can be available to finish that particular job together without splitting the task as much as I can.
Okay, it makes sense.
Does that make sense? Because there is something about splitting the task is when you split the task, there's a lot of time setup and setup time that is required every single time. The less splitting you do, the better it is for your project.
Right. Okay.
You don't want to split too much because imagine I'm telling you, Jake, I want you to go and do this task now for half a day. Then I want you to go and another day do something else for half a day, and then I want you to come back to this task and do for half a day. It's going to not be very productive. And that's why we're basing it based on people need to be available to fully work on that task.
Okay. Okay.
Clear?
Got it. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Now, no worries, mate. Now I'm moving to this section. Would I do 5 or would I do 6?
6.
6. Why 6?
Because it starts at 0.
0 slacks. So when can 6 start?
Ladder.
Preman, let's have a song. Let's go, mate.
On day 6.
Okay, we start in day 6, correct? For how many days?
4 days.
4 days. So that's one. You know, we actually we actually need to go and put that one first because we haven't actually put in that one yet. We need to go and do that one, that task first. We haven't finished that task first. So you know how we've delayed that task here? Okay, that needs to start before you're going to continue the project because you are doing every task in parallel. So once you finish that, you're going to have to go and do the 2 people. So that's going to be between days 6 because it can't stay before, and it's for 6 days. So it's going to go to day 12. And then you are right. We're going to have to go and do activity 6, which is this activity here. 1 person, 1 person, 1 person, 1 person. So we are now maximizing the use of our resources. We have done 2P first because 2P is on the same parallel row. We've done this. That's the one that is left for us to go and do. So what we've done is we use that activity. So let me go back and explain again. We now have done activity 1. It's finished. We now have done activity 3. It's finished. We've done activity 4. It's finished. We need to go and do the last activity that is in parallel. Which one is this? That's activity 2. We know because it has 2 people, it cannot start in days 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we know it needs to start here in day 6. And we know that it takes 6 days. So 6, it starts in 6. 1, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So it starts here between 6 and 7, 7 and 8, 8 and 9, 9 and 10, 10, 11, and 11, 12. That's 6 days where we are using 2 people here. Then we go to this section and we say, okay, now I need to do the one with minimum slack. So that's 6. And that's why you guys said 1P, 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 1P. So that goes here. Let me ask you a question. When can I now, which activity do I start after I've done this? 5 and 6 left. Which one would I do?
After 6, we need to start 5.
5. When can I start 5?
From day 10.
Why day 10? Why not day 9?
We don't have enough resources.
You don't have enough resources. There's 1, 2, 3 already used, 2, 3 used. Here I only have 2 people left. Here I have 1 person. So it's basically could start at this point. Now let me ask you a question. If this was 2 people instead of 1, when can I start 6?
Day 12.
You will start it in day 12 because you won't have enough resources to start it in day 10. So we know we need 1 person only. We know we have used only 2 people between days and day 12, and we know we have 1 more person available. So you basically would use here, you say XXXX. I cannot start it here. Why? Because we have already used all the resources. That's why you put an X. That's mean I cannot start it. And you would start it straight after where you have a resource, 2, 3, 2, 3. You basically use it at that particular point. What's the last activity to do now?
7.
7. Okay, great. When does it start?
Day 10.
Are you sure you can start
Oh,
it
sorry,
day 10?
no, we need to start from 12 now.
12, correct. Why? Because I've already used all my 3 resources. So it starts in day 12. It can't start here. That's why there's an X. It could start here. Now let me ask you a question. Can activity 4 be delayed at all?
Yes.
Yes? How many days?
6 days.
6 days.
6 days, really?
2 days.
Yes.
Only 2 days, because you cannot delay it here.
No,
Why can't I delay it for here?
Because of the resources.
Because I don't have resources. Where can I delay it for?
Until day
We
4.
can,
Until
we can only start from day 10.
4, 5.
4 and 5, I can delay it. Correct. There's a slack because here I'm using 2 resources. Here I'm using 2 resources. I still have 1 extra resource I can use here. So I can delay it for 2 days.
Sorry, sir, but what does that mean? That because table 4 says the slack is 6, so I don't see it matching up with the Gantt chart.
Don't worry about the Gantt chart. The Gantt chart is based on I have as many resources as possible. Okay? Now you're coming and say, I do not have as many resources as I need. I have limited resources. Because you have limited resources, the timelines you see on the Gantt chart will change. So if for example, if there were no resource constraint, oh yeah, no problem. You can start at any time. You can start it even in day 8. You can delay it for 6 days, no problem. But because you have a constrained resources, you cannot really start it here because you don't have enough resources. They're already going to be used doing something else. If, however, you had 4 resources, you would say, no problem. I could start it in day 8 because I have enough resources. It's no problem. I could start it in day 6. I could start it in whatever. And that becomes the 6 days of slack. But we are showing you the example where there's a resource constraint. And because there's a resource constraint, things cannot just start at any time. You need to look whether you have resources available.
Okay, I think I gonna get it.
So bear in mind that when you create a network diagram, and that's why that relates to the first slide that I did, a network is not a schedule until I assign a resource to it. Once you assign a resource, you know really how much slack you have. Because if you have a constrained resource, then your slack is going to be having to change. You're going to use as many do as many activities at the same time and as early as possible using the resources you have to minimize any delay in your project. And that means you basically using all of your slack. You cannot use this. This was a slack, but I used that slack to finish the project as early as possible. I had to use that slack, which means I now have less slack available. That happens when a resource is constrained. So when a resource is constrained, you use all your slack that is available to reduce the duration of that project finishing. Does that make sense?
Yes. Also, I just noticed that so basically the network diagram is just basically an ultimate guide for the Gantt chart because it looks like from the Gantt chart it ends at day 14, whereas on the network it just says it ends at day 12. So
correct. When there's a resource constraint, okay, it means when you are using your slack, your project duration is increasing. So in normal condition, if you have enough resources, your project will finish in day 12. In the circumstances where you don't have enough people, what is happening? You're basically using all your slack and pushing the project beyond its original deadline because you do not have enough resources. You have a constrained resource available. If you add more resources, all of this becomes correct. It will finish in day 12. If you have no resources, which means you cannot add more, the time of the project needs to be increased. Does that make sense?
yep, got it, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so like I tell you, I have this activity, and we usually could finish it in 10 days if we have three people. But I can tell you, listen, you only have 2 people. Can you still finish it in 10 days?
No.
You can't. It has to go and increase because the resources are constrained. You're using less people, it's going to take longer. Is that clear?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So we're going to have many more calculations to go and actually apply for a number of people who came late. Thank you for coming, but please remember that these are very important calculations. If you miss, it makes your ability to apply them very difficult. So you really need to be coming at the beginning of the classes to avoid making your life difficult in learning this calculation that will be in every single exam you are going to be doing. So ladies and gentlemen, we can see now that early start is 0 and early finish is 2, sorry, latest finish is 2, slack is 0. Here, for example, you see start in day 2 and latest finish is 6. Why? Because we have a slack. So early start is 2, latest finish is 6. Here, early start is 2, latest finish is 12, 0 slack. Here, early start is 10, latest finish is 12. Okay, so you're basically filling that table and you're basically writing how many resources have we used at any particular point of time. 1 person, 3 people, 3 people, 2 people. You can see that information. This basically telling you why we've used the rules, how we've applied the rules, minimum slack, smallest ID number, and so on. So basically, you can see that the project is now going to take longer, as we've explained earlier, because you do not have enough resources. The impact of resource-constrained project is you will have much less flexibility. More events will start being critical. There's going to be less slack available. Your sequence of event might be broken down. Something you might start usually in day 2, you now have to go and start in day 10, for example. Many parallel activities that you would usually start in parallel if you have enough resources will now have to go and do sequentially one after the other. So all of this will go and waste your time, waste your resources. But all of this scheduling could potentially be facilitated by systems like Microsoft Project, which could basically go and help you out. A lot of time we try to split the task, and split the task is like I am interrupting the task. I'm basically stopping the task, starting the task, stopping the task, starting the task. Now, this is usually okay as long as it doesn't take you a long time to start the task and then to end the task. So you need to basically be very careful on that, because a lot of time when you are splitting an activity, let's say, hey, I split it and then I start, I split and then I start. Every time you stop and start, you would usually be adding time. So instead of the project taking you that long, because you're stopping and splitting, it is basically increasing the duration of your project. It's basically going to go and start taking you longer time to be able to go and really get the job to go and be completed. So that's something to go and bear in mind. Splitting, it does not necessarily the best way, because it could delay the finish of your project. Now, creating a schedule before the actual project begins help you to go and start consider all of these alternatives. Help you to go and consider, well, what happens if I go and increase my time? What happens if I go and get more resources? What happens if I go and reduce my scope? You start basically trying to go and think about everything that could happen in terms of the schedule, and try to think about alternatives that you might need to go and consider to be able to get a proper scheduling to go and occur. Resource schedules, guys, provide you with the information. When you know when the resources are going to be used, you'll be able to go and know, you'll be able to start considering the budget. Because if I know that Fadi is going to be working and teaching ICT712 on a Tuesday between this time and this time, I know that during this time and this time, I need to be paying Fadi. Okay, so what it does, it basically tells you when you need the budget to be available, and it's basically corresponding to when that task is going to go and be started. It does provide a quick means for a project manager to gauge the impact of unforeseen events such as turnover or equipment breakdown. What would I do if there's turnover? What would I do if there's an equipment breakdown? All of these will go and start changing. Allow the project managers to go and assess how much flexibility is there over certain resources. When using those resources, do I have flexibility? Is there a slack? Are there things I can go and benefit from? Project managers need to ensure to go and manage their schedule. They need to go and try to match the actual demand with the actual qualification. So if I have task A, if you want someone to go and teach project management, you won't give it to someone who is basically very experienced. You won't be able to go and use it with someone who is really experienced in, let's say, teaching management. That's not going to work. You need to go and create the people who basically would be able to go and have the right skills to be able to go and do the right job. So matching as best as they can the demand and requirements of a task with the experience of a certain person. Balancing the task performance with the need to develop the talent. So sometimes, yes, we want to finish the task, but at the same time, we want to go and develop the skills of our own people. So maybe if it takes a bit longer, sometimes that's fine because we need to train those people. Pick the people to work together if their personalities match, if their habits match. They can complement each other. Have people who are very experienced work with people who are not experienced, because you want this socializing of newcomers. You want them to feel part of that extra learning that they are going to go and actually build. A lot of time there's a problem. There's a multi-project scheduling problem. For example, I have project 1 and project 2. If project 1 is going to be delayed, what will happen is project 2 is also going to be delayed. So one project delays the other project. Sometimes we are using the resources in an efficient manner. Like as I showed you earlier, 2 people, 4 people, 2 people, 1 people, 2 people, 6 people. It's inefficient allocation. So you can't really work in this inefficient manner. You need to go and work it in a very much appropriate manner. Resource bottlenecks, shortages of critical resources required for multiple projects cause delays and schedule extensions. So you need to bear that in mind. If there are any shortages, you need to basically bear in mind what impact is that going to have, especially when this shortage is going to go and build from one project to another project. So we need to try to manage this problem when there's more than one project. And that's why, as a project management company, what we do, we create a project management office. And that project management office oversees all the resources across all the various projects. They use a project priority queue system. First come, first serve. First come, we use the resources first. You centralize project management. You treat all projects as part of one big mega project. We outsource projects to reduce the number of projects handled internally. If we don't have enough resources, let's go and outsource. Let's get some more people outside to go and really help us out. Let me ask you a question about budget, guys. Okay? Remember, when there's a budget for your project, you need to ensure that budget is planned over an extended period of time. Like, let's say your project is 10 weeks, you need to make sure that that budget is planned over a 10 weeks period. So let me ask you this question. If planned cost for 10 weeks is $4 million, and if at week 5, we have spent $2.4 million, so we spent more than $2 million in week 5. Did we overspend by $400,000? Yes or no? And why? Did we overspend or no?
I'm not sure about the question yet.
So we have a project, it's 10 weeks period. Over 10 weeks period, it was going to cost us $4 million. We are now in week number 5. We've used $2.4 million. By week 5, if you consider that 50%, by week 5, it's $2 million. So we have used, by week 5, $2.4 million. My question to you is, have we overspent by $400,000?
No, not yet.
So what's the answer? Yes, no? If no, why not?
Because at the end of the project, the budget that we use is not actually the same as the first 50%. Maybe less, maybe more. Yeah.
Kind of, yes, but you haven't explained it really well. I might be in week 5. I might have finished the majority of the work by week 5 and only spent 2.4 million. I might have been in week 5 and I barely finished 2 days worth of work and I've spent 2.4 million. And if that's the case, then yes, I have spent so much money more. So the answer is maybe yes, maybe no. You need to know, am I ahead of time in the schedule? or am I behind schedule? If I spent 2.4 million and I am behind schedule in terms of the work that I needed to do, then yes, I did overspend. If I spent 2.4 million, but I am ahead of schedule, then actually I am saving money because I'm finishing more work than I was actually expected to go and really spend and finish at a particular point of time. So you need to always look at the spending and compare that spending in terms of how much work have you actually completed. And that's something we're going to talk about in subsequent lectures. But this is another reason why you need to go and have a baseline. You need to go and actually compare how much work you've completed comparing to how much work you plan to complete. That's why you need a phase project. Let me see for every phase how much money I needed to go and spend. And I'll compare that spending compared to what I was supposed to be spending at a particular point of time. We need to create a time phase budget. How do we do it? We need to define what needs to be done, how long it's going to need to go and complete, how much is it going to cost me, how many resources am I going to be needing, who is going to be responsible for that job, and how well are we going to be monitoring to ensure how we are actually progressing for the work. Without all of these points, you cannot really create a time phase budget. This is an example. I have an activity called coding. It's going to cost me $2,000. Labor rate is $2,000 per week. I have day 1, day 2, day 3, or week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, whatever it is. I am spending at each period of time, I'm spending a various different amount of money. So if I know I'm spending $50 for the whole 5 weeks, I need to know when am I spending the money? 20, 15, 15. If I'm spending $130 on integration, I need to know when am I spending the money? 60 and 70. So you can see here, I'm spending 20 for period 1, 15 for period 2, 60 and 15 for period 3, 75, 70 for period 4. So you need to know for every duration, for every period, how much money I need to be able to compare what I was planned to need versus how much money I have actually spent at a particular point of time. You need to look here, for example, you have a task, you have like all of these activities, 0 all the way to the end. You need to know, okay, for these activities, when do I need the money? Okay, design data, well, I need 5 in day 1, great. Design entry forms, it's over 2 days. I need 2 and 2 here, perfect. Activity 3, it's over 3 days. Okay, I need 2, 2 and 2. So you need to know over which days you need the money. And then you start adding the money, 5. Okay, then I need 6 here. So that's 6 plus 5 equal 11. Then I need 4 here. 4 here plus 11 equal 15. Then 3 here. 3 plus 15 give me 18. Then here, 4. Okay, 4 plus 41 equals 45. So you keep on adding. You see how your budget, your planned spending will start increasing as you start progressing in terms of doing your work. When you look at the money you need at each period of time, you also need to go and look the people I'm going to be needing and the budget I'm going to be needing. The budget, I know for January, that's what I need. For February, that's what I need. Where did we get that from? We got it from all of these activities where I said every activity, how much money it's going to cost me. And I combine all of these activities and that gives me a budget for each month. How much is a budget? How much I'm spending? And I need to also ask myself this question. What about the resources? Suzuki for this week is going to work 24 hours. Suzuki is going to work for this week 40 hours. 40 hours is 24 hours on this task and 16 hours on this task. You need to know what they're doing. Why? Because if you are allocating them more than 40 hours, they cannot work. And that's why you need to ask yourself for each activity, who am I assigning to do the job? Because that will tell you whether you are actually allocating people more or less than 40 hours per week. This person is only working 24 hours per week, so he can work more time if I need him to go and do that extra work. Does that make sense? Is that clear? Any questions?
No, sir.
Alrighty.
Are these calculations in the quiz later or just from week 1 to week 3?
No, this is not in today's quiz. This is something that will probably be in the midterm exam, but not in your quiz.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. Any other questions? All right, guys. Please, for this week, you need to review the lecture slides, tutorial materials, and notes you've taken. You need to read chapter 8, and you need to continue preparing for your midterm exam, which is going to happen in week 6 online. So we'll do that down the track. We'll talk more about that shortly. But for today, thank you very much for all your time, all your effort. I really appreciate you. I really care about you. I really hope that you're going to continue coming to the class every week on time, learning every week the calculation, because I don't want you to go and find anything difficult. And if you don't attend the classes on time, you will actually experience that difficulty. So please do not experience it. Make sure you come on time to your classes. Thank you very much. I'll see you very shortly in the tutorial.